June 4, 1942. Midway Atoll. 10:25 a.m. The air above the Pacific is thick with the roar of engines and the crackle of anti-aircraft fire. Clouds of black smoke bloom in the sky as tracer rounds streak toward the heavens. From the deck of the USS Yorktown, CV-5, sailors squint upward, their hands trembling as they reload belts of ammunition into the 20mm Oerlikons. The carrier pitches under their boots, the scent of salt and burnt cordite mixing in the wind. Below deck, the ship hums with life. Men in oil-stained dungarees rush through narrow corridors, shouting over the metallic clang of bulkheads. Steam hisses from pipes. Damage control parties grip hoses and wrenches, waiting for the next order. The Yorktown is alive again, barely 72 hours after she was supposed to be a wreck at the bottom of the Coral Sea. 3 weeks earlier, no one in the U.S. Navy had believed she'd ever fight again. May 8, 1942, Coral Sea. The Yorktown shuddered violently as 2 Japanese bombs tore through her flight deck, sending debris and fire cascading into the hangar below. The explosions ignited planes, fuel, and ammunition. Flames rolled across the deck, and the ship's list began to deepen. Men were blown from their stations, others clawed their way through choking smoke to keep the pumps running. For hours, damage control teams battled the inferno. By nightfall, the fires were out, but the Yorktown was dying. Her hull was scarred, her flight deck cratered, and her power systems crippled. Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, her commanding officer, ordered the ship to limp toward Tongatabu for emergency repairs. By the time she reached Pearl Harbor on May 27, naval engineers estimated she would need 3 months in dry dock to return to service. The Japanese believed she was finished. Their reconnaissance reports confirmed heavy damage, and Tokyo intelligence confidently listed the Yorktown as sunk. But in those desperate spring weeks of 1942, the United States could not afford to lose a single carrier. At Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, word of the Yorktown's arrival spread like wildfire. Before dawn, hundreds of dockworkers assembled along the piers. Welders, electricians, riggers, and carpenters, all volunteers, prepared to work around the clock. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, arrived in person to inspect the damage. The moment he stepped aboard, he turned to his officers and said, "We need her in 3 days." No one thought it was possible. But no one dared to refuse. The first sparks flew before the sun was fully up. Dock cranes swung massive sheets of steel over the decks. Teams of welders, faces hidden behind heavy masks, carved glowing lines into the hull. Electricians rewired blackened systems while carpenters patched the flight deck with fresh timber. The work never stopped, not for meals, not for sleep. By the end of the first day, the dry dock floor was littered with twisted metal. By the second, the smell of hot paint and diesel filled the harbor. And by the third, as Nimitz returned to inspect her once more, the Yorktown's engines roared to life. She wasn't perfect, some systems remained jury-rigged, and her decks still bore scars, but she could launch planes, recover them, and fight. When she slipped out of Pearl Harbor and steamed toward Midway on May 30, her deck still smelled of fresh paint. Her crew, many still bruised from Coral Sea, knew they were heading straight into another storm. They also knew the Japanese believed the Yorktown was gone. June 4, Midway. From the bridge of the Japanese carrier Akagi, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo scanned the horizon. Reports had just come in from reconnaissance aircraft. 2 American carriers sighted northeast of Midway. 2? Nagumo murmured, frowning. That couldn't be right. Intelligence had confirmed only 2 operational U.S. carriers, the Enterprise and Hornet. The Yorktown was supposed to be resting on the seafloor. He ordered confirmation, his eyes narrowing. Minutes later, a Japanese pilot radioed back with a chilling update: enemy carrier sighted, identified as Yorktown. Nagumo froze. For a moment, he thought he'd misheard. Then realization struck. The Americans had done the impossible. The Yorktown had returned from the grave. All across the Japanese task force, disbelief rippled through the radio chatter. Officers exchanged stunned looks. In Tokyo, High Command would later refuse to believe the first reports. But on that morning over Midway, the ghost of the Coral Sea was steaming straight toward them, its decks lined with dauntless dive bombers ready to strike back. And soon, the shock that rippled through Nagumo's fleet would turn to chaos. The Yorktown was not supposed to exist. Yet here she was, alive, armed, and about to change the course of the Pacific War. June 4, 1942, 10:30 a.m., north of Midway Atoll. From high above the Pacific, the ocean looks endless, a field of blue-gray silk rippling beneath the sun. But for the pilots of the U.S. Navy's Task Force 17, that vast emptiness hides death. Somewhere below, beyond the horizon, sails the most powerful carrier fleet ever assembled, WWII, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. On the deck of the USS Yorktown, Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie, leader of Bombing Squadron 3, VB-3, tightens the straps of his harness. His dauntless dive bomber creaks under the weight of its 1,000-pound bomb. Sweat trickles down his neck as he glances at his gunner behind him, radioman William "Gunner" Rodman, who gives a silent thumbs up. The flight deck crew waves them forward. The smell of gasoline fills the air as engines roar to life. Plane after plane rolls down the deck, lifting into the sky, their wings flashing in the sunlight. The Yorktown's air group climbs eastward to rendezvous with the Enterprise and Hornet squadrons already searching for the Japanese carriers. Over the radio, static bursts with fragments of nervous chatter, coordinates, weather updates, and the occasional prayer. Down below, Admiral Fletcher stands on the bridge, binoculars in hand, his expression unreadable. He knows they are outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting on a knife's edge. If Midway falls, Hawaii could be next. But if they can crush Japan's carriers here, it could turn the tide of the entire Pacific War. And now, one of his own, Yorktown, has become the symbol of defiance itself. Meanwhile, aboard the Japanese carrier Akagi, Admiral Nagumo grips the railing of his command bridge. Reports from his scouts are pouring in, American aircraft inbound. His carrier group is already under pressure from Midway-based bombers that struck earlier, forcing him to delay his second wave of attacks. He had planned to destroy the island's defenses first, then finish the American fleet when it inevitably appeared. But now the enemy carriers are here, and his decks are cluttered with fully fueled and armed planes, torpedoes mounted, bombs stacked along the hangar deck, fuel lines still running. He faces an impossible choice. Launch immediately with whatever is ready, or rearm for an anti-ship strike and risk being caught mid-preparation. At 10:32, Nagumo hesitates. He orders a rearmament. Bombs are swapped for torpedoes, ordnance crews rush to refit planes. The decks turn into a powder keg. And then, out of the clouds, American dive bombers appear. At 10:38, Leslie's dauntless squadrons from the Yorktown dive through breaks in the overcast sky. The ocean below erupts in white foam as Japanese flak fills the air, black bursts cracking like thunder. Tracers streak upward. The smell of gunpowder and burning fuel fills the cockpit. Leslie pushes the nose of his plane down, steeply, almost vertically, his stomach lurching as the Dauntless screams toward the carrier Soryu. The target swells in his sights, crewmen scattering across its deck like ants. He releases the bomb. For a fraction of a second, there's silence, then an eruption of fire and metal. The 1,000-pounder punches through the flight deck, detonating amid armed aircraft below. The explosion blossoms into a fireball that engulfs the hangar. Soryu shudders, slowing, flames spilling from her open elevators. The dauntless pilots pull away, engines howling. One by one, bombs strike home, one on Soryu, two on Kaga, one on Akagi. Within minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 carriers are burning. Admiral Nagumo's flagship, Akagi, is engulfed in black smoke. Crewmen hurl themselves into the sea as fire races across her deck. Nagumo stands frozen, unable to comprehend how his mighty fleet, invincible since Pearl Harbor, has been undone in minutes. Somewhere over the radio, a voice crackles in disbelief. Yorktown. Yorktown, the Americans' Yorktown is here. The ghost ship from the Coral Sea had returned, and it had delivered vengeance. But the battle isn't over. Far to the east, the fourth Japanese carrier, Hiryu, remains untouched. Her decks are clear, her pilots furious. Commander Tomio Kaku, one of Japan's most experienced airmen, demands permission to strike back. Admiral Yamaguchi Tamon, aboard Hiryu, gives a single, decisive order. Find the Yorktown. Sink her. And with that, 40 Japanese aircraft rise from the Hiryu's deck, engines snarling as they head straight toward the carrier that should have been dead. The men of the Yorktown have no idea what's coming. June 4, 1942, 11:15 a.m., north of Midway Atoll. The roar of the Yorktown's anti-aircraft batteries fills the air with a relentless staccato. 5-inch guns swivel on their mounts, belching smoke and fire, while 40mm Bofors and 20mm Oerlikons pepper the sky with tracer streaks. Sailors shout over the din, coordinating fire control as Japanese torpedo bombers dive toward the carrier. Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie, still in the air above, glances back at the Yorktown. From thousands of feet up, the carrier is a target painted in smoke and sunlight, surrounded by a black swirl of enemy aircraft. Every man on deck knows this is a test of every skill, every system, every heartbeat they've survived in the last 3 weeks. Below deck, the crew braces for impact. Damage control parties are stationed at ready, hoses coiled, pumps primed. Electricians patrol circuits that were hot rewired in a frantic 72-hour sprint at Pearl Harbor. Welders hover near structural weak points, fire extinguishers in hand. Every system hums with tension, every man knows that one lucky hit could undo the miracle that brought Yorktown back from Coral Sea. High above, Japanese attack formations close in. Lieutenant Shigeru Murata, leading a squadron of 9 Nakajima B-5N, Kate, torpedo bombers from Hiryu, weaves through American fighters. Clouds streak past his cockpit as he adjusts speed and altitude. His navigator, fumbling with a sextant and radio signals, mutters coordinates under his breath. The Yorktown CAP, Grumman F-4F Wildcats, dives from above, their machine guns roaring, gunsight tracers slicing across Murata's squadron. 2 Kates spiral downward, smoking, before disappearing into the ocean. The rest press on, torpedoes locked and armed, determined to finish what the Coral Sea could not. Below, the Yorktown rolls under her own momentum. Her deck tilts, pitching with the swell of the sea. Torpedo alarms blare. Crewmen dive for cover, gripping whatever they can. Then, at 11:25, the first torpedo strikes. It hits the starboard side, near the engine room. A deafening explosion rips through the hull. Steam and oil burst upward, coating the deck in a choking mist. Sailors are thrown off their feet. Electrical systems flicker. Smoke coils toward the bridge. Damage control teams act instantly. Men throw themselves into the breach, securing bulkheads, shoring up weakened hull sections, and pumping water to counter the flooding. Fire hoses scream. One officer, Lieutenant Robert T. Smith, is already shouting orders, directing men like a general on a battlefield. Keep her level. Don't let her list. Get the water out. Despite the chaos, Yorktown keeps moving. Her speed falters but does not cease. Pilots above dive in, strafing incoming Kates with everything the Wildcat has. Tracer fire whips through the sky, punctuated by the thud of exploding torpedoes in the water. Meanwhile, the men in the flight deck hangar sense the urgency like a pulse. Mechanics scramble to repair planes damaged in the previous sorties. Ordnance crews race to reload weapons, hands black with grease, eyes red from smoke. Fuel lines hiss dangerously as men slide under spinning propellers, fully aware that one spark could ignite catastrophe. On the bridge, Admiral Fletcher peers through binoculars at the incoming enemy. He mutters to his aides. They believe she's dead. They've thrown everything at her. Yet she fights, still. From the perspective of Japanese command, the Yorktown is no longer just a carrier, it is a ghost, a symbol of the impossible. Intelligence officers radio back to Tokyo, stammering over broken signals. Enemy. Yorktown, operational, repeat, operational. The Admiral himself cannot believe it. Every pilot and sailor aboard the Yorktown has become part of a living myth. They fight not just with guns and bombs but with the knowledge that they are defying expectation, rewriting what the Japanese Navy thought possible. At 11:45, the battle reaches its apex. The second wave of Japanese aircraft from Hiryu arrives. This time, dive bombers, each carrying a 1,000-pound bomb, streak toward the Yorktown from above. Lieutenant Leslie's squadron is already circling back, engines whining. He watches the dive bombers lock onto the carrier, tracing perfect arcs toward the deck. He yells into the radio. Yorktown. AA, don't let them get through. Anti-aircraft crews tighten their grips, eyes trained on the incoming silhouettes. Shells begin to explode in midair, some detonating mere feet from the Yorktown's deck. Sparks rain down as fragments strike, bouncing harmlessly off reinforced plating in some places, tearing through canvas and deck fittings in others. One bomb lands near the bow, exploding in a geyser of flame and shrapnel. Men are thrown from their feet, and smoke engulfs the forward gun mounts. Yet the Yorktown rolls, listing slightly, but she does not sink. Her engines groan and push her forward. Her crew, bound by adrenaline and determination, fights through the carnage. Somewhere beneath the chaos, the echo of Coral Sea whispers to them, the memory of fire and near destruction, the reminder that they were supposed to be gone. But here they are, alive, fighting, and refusing to let history write them off. The ghost ship fights on. June 4, 1942, 12:10 p.m., north of Midway Atoll. The Yorktown lurches forward, engines straining under the weight of damage. Smoke drifts over her deck, curling toward the sky like spectral fingers. Sailors stagger but keep moving, dragging hoses and ammo belts across the slick, salt-stung steel. Every heartbeat is measured against the roar of the sea and the deadly hum of incoming Japanese planes. On the bridge, Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher grips the railing. Through binoculars, he watches Hiryu's aircraft circling above. The fourth Japanese carrier, the only one still untouched, prepares to strike, but Fletcher already has a plan. The Yorktown cannot simply survive, she must fight back to change the momentum of the battle. Get those dauntless up. Fletcher barks. We hit Hiryu while she's still climbing. Below deck, flight crews race to their planes. Pilots slide into cockpits, mechanics perform last-minute checks, and ordnance teams strap bombs into place. Engines scream to life, metal groaning under the stress of hasty preparation. The flight deck heaves as propellers kick up wind strong enough to snuff out smaller flames, sending a mist of salt spray over the men working below. Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie, now back from his first attack on Soryu, climbs into a freshly armed Dauntless. His navigator, Gunner Rodman, checks their coordinates and nods grimly. We're going to make her pay, Rodman says, tightening his harness. Leslie grips the controls, his knuckles white, the smell of hot oil and smoke thick in his nostrils. The first wave of Yorktown dive bombers roars into the sky. They bank eastward, engines screaming, climbing toward Hiryu. Japanese gunners on the carrier decks open fire with 25mm and 13mm guns, but the Americans push through the inferno. Every shell that explodes near their wings is a reminder of how fragile this miracle of a ship really is. 12:35 p.m., Hiryu. Commander Tomio Kaku watches incoming Dauntless, eyes narrowing. He signals his pilots to prepare evasive maneuvers, but the Americans are fast, coordinated, and precise. Leslie's squadron begins its dive. Engines scream, planes plummeting almost vertically, sights fixed on the flight deck. The ocean rises and falls in his vision, horizon tilting with the pull of gravity. He releases his bomb, a 1,000-pounder, and it strikes Hiryu amidships. Flames erupt instantly, snaking across the deck and igniting aircraft lined up for launch. Smoke rises, black and thick, and men scatter in every direction. Other bombs follow. One hits the forward elevator, one slams into the island structure. Within minutes, Hiryu is ablaze, fires consuming her decks like a forest fire. For the Japanese, disbelief turns to horror. In a matter of hours, 3 carriers are burning. One, Yorktown, supposedly sunk at Coral Sea, has returned from the dead to deliver these blows. Back on the Yorktown, men stare toward the horizon as Hiryu's flames rise. The decks are scarred, some guns silent from earlier hits, but the crew cheers anyway. A rare, shared sense of triumph electrifies the air, mixing with the acrid smoke. For a moment, the impossible feels real. Lieutenant Commander Leslie, circling to regroup with remaining squadrons, radios back. Target destroyed. Repeat, Hiryu is on fire. Yorktown is still in the fight. Fletcher watches, expression hard, yet there's a flicker of pride. The Yorktown's return, this rapid repair against impossible odds, has not only shocked the Japanese command but has also revitalized the morale of every sailor in the Pacific. Even as the carrier rocks under the impact of lingering torpedo and bomb strikes, she is now a symbol, proof that determination, ingenuity, and sheer grit can defy expectation. But the battle is far from over. Hiryu, though crippled, has already launched a second wave targeting the Yorktown. Japanese torpedo planes and dive bombers roar back into the sky, their eyes fixed on the carrier that should have been lost. Smoke mingles with clouds as the Yorktown braces for another attack. Every man knows that one lucky strike could finally send the ghost ship to the depths of the Pacific. Still, they fight. Still, the Yorktown refuses to die. June 4, 1942, 1:15 p.m., north of Midway Atoll. Smoke and salt spray cling to every surface of the Yorktown. Decks are slick with seawater, oil, and blood. Men stumble but keep moving, hauling ammunition, rotating gun crews, patching shrapnel-riddled bulkheads. Somewhere below, a generator hums weakly, struggling to keep power flowing to damaged systems. Above, Japanese aircraft return, Hiryu's vengeance wave riding the thermals. Torpedo bombers scream toward the Yorktown, their payloads poised to tear through her hull. Anti-aircraft crews swivel every gun, their eyes red and raw, fingers white on triggers. On the bridge, Admiral Fletcher surveys the scene. He knows the Yorktown's fate hangs by a thread, yet he does not order retreat. Not now. Not after what these men and dockworkers accomplished at Pearl Harbor. The carrier has returned from the dead, it must fight to the last breath. 1:30 p.m., Hiryu's attack. The first torpedo slips through, striking starboard amidships. The hull groans and water surges into flooded compartments. Damage control teams rush to counterflood and stabilize. Flames lick nearby bulkheads as electrical shorts spark. Sailors shout over the roar, orchestrating a delicate dance between fire, water, and steel. A second torpedo finds its mark near the bow. The deck quakes, a massive wave rolls over it, and a section of the forward catapult is torn away. Men are thrown into the air, some crash into deck equipment. Yet still, the Yorktown does not sink. Her engines strain, but she continues to move, a wounded Leviathan refusing to die. Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie, circling above, watches in horror. Smoke obscures parts of the carrier, making targeting treacherous. He radios back. Yorktown, under heavy fire. Damaged, but she's still fighting. Below deck, damage control is relentless. Lieutenant Robert T. Smith commands a team working to seal a bulkhead rapidly flooding. Men heave, wedge, and hammer. A pipe bursts nearby, sending scalding steam across the compartment. Smith shouts over the hiss. "Keep her level. Keep her afloat. God help us, don't let her go down." Every sailor knows they are on borrowed time. Every repaired wire, every welded seam, every hastily patched hole is being tested to the extreme. The miracle of Pearl Harbor's 72-hour repair now meets the unforgiving firepower of Japan's elite. 1:50 p.m., the decisive moment. Dive bombers streak from above, their shadows falling across the Yorktown. One 1,000-pound bomb strikes the centerline near the aft elevators. The impact shakes the ship violently. Smoke roars up, mingling with the acrid stench of burning aviation fuel. Sailors are thrown to the deck. Fires erupt, overwhelming hoses in some sections. Admiral Fletcher grips the railing as alarms scream continuously. He glances at the men around him, gunners, radio operators, engineers, all resolute, refusing to show fear. The carrier is wounded but alive, the symbol of an impossible comeback. Yet beneath the hull, the damage is critical. The Japanese have achieved the unthinkable. Yorktown, the miraculous survivor, is mortally wounded. Damage control teams fight valiantly, but water floods lower compartments, and the list increases. 2:20 p.m., the aftermath. The Japanese attack withdraws, carriers turning toward regrouping, pilots exhausted, some shot down by defending wildcats. Yorktown lists heavily, smoke pouring from both stacks and flight deck. Fires rage in multiple sections, but she remains afloat, refusing to succumb immediately. Admiral Fletcher gives the grim order. Prepare to abandon ship if necessary. She's earned her place in history. Planes already in the air circle back to the Yorktown, keeping an eye on the carrier as the men on deck continue to fight the fires and flooding. Every heartbeat echoes Coral Sea, every action a testament to human endurance, teamwork, and courage under fire. By nightfall, despite the valiant defense, the Yorktown is doomed. Damage is too severe, and flooding irretrievable. Torpedoes from American destroyers finish the final act, sending the carrier to the depths. Yet, as she slips beneath the waves, the story of Yorktown is etched into legend. She returned from apparent destruction, defied expectation, stunned the Japanese command, and changed the course of the Battle of Midway. Her crew survives to tell the tale, her planes and pilots strike decisive blows that cripple Japan's carrier force, and her return from the Coral Sea remains a symbol of American ingenuity, determination, and indomitable spirit. June 5, 1942, Midway Atoll, dawn. The sea is calm, almost serene, a deceptive contrast to the chaos of the day before. Survivors of the Yorktown cluster in lifeboats and on destroyer decks, faces streaked with soot and salt, eyes hollow yet defiant. The Pacific stretches endlessly around them, holding the sun above and the memory of fire below. Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher moves among the men, offering terse words of encouragement. "We lost a ship, but not our purpose," he says. His voice carries over the water, steady and resolute. The Japanese carriers are crippled. Midway stands. The Pacific is ours to defend. Across the Japanese command, disbelief still simmers. 3 carriers destroyed, 1 heavily damaged, hundreds of seasoned pilots lost in a single day. Japanese naval intelligence, which had confidently reported the Yorktown sunk weeks earlier, is left questioning every assumption. The ghost that should have been dead had not only returned, it had struck with lethal precision. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, once a figure of unshakable calm, retreats into shadows aboard a remaining vessel. For the first time in his career, he faces the full consequences of misjudgment and underestimation of his enemy. Tokyo receives reports almost in disbelief. The Americans' Yorktown, miraculously repaired in 72 hours, had returned to change history. Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. Back home, dockworkers who had labored day and night for 3 impossible days receive word of Yorktown's performance at Midway. Cheers erupt. The miracle they wrought is no longer theoretical, it is etched into the annals of naval history. Their sweat, their ingenuity, their refusal to accept impossible, had delivered a ship to the battlefield against all odds. In officers' quarters and mess halls, sailors retell the story of Yorktown's return. They speak not just of the ship, but of the spirit of American determination, of men and women working together to defy expectation. The narrative spreads, a legend born of fire, salt, and unbreakable resolve. Midway Atoll. Survivors recount the actions of their comrades with reverence, pilots who pressed attacks through blinding flak, gunners who held fire until the last possible second, engineers and damage control teams who patched a bleeding ship while enemy planes screamed overhead. Names like Max Leslie, Robert T. Smith, and countless others become synonymous with courage against impossible odds. Journalists and historians later describe the Battle of Midway as the turning point in the Pacific War. Yorktown's return, and her crew's valor, becomes a central narrative. Japan's plans for domination crumble, morale shifts, and the U.S. Navy emerges not just victorious, but revitalized with the confidence that ingenuity, speed, and courage can turn disaster into triumph. Even in the quiet moments, the legacy lingers. Sailors tell stories to new recruits of the ghost carrier that rose from the depths of defeat to deliver a decisive blow. Engineers at Pearl Harbor marvel at how 3 days of relentless labor yielded a ship that would stun the world. The story of the Yorktown is no longer just about a vessel, it is about people, skill, resilience, and the refusal to accept the impossible. In history books, in documentaries, and in oral histories, the USS Yorktown, CV-5, is remembered as more than a ship. She is a symbol of what determination, teamwork, and courage can achieve, even when the world believes all hope is lost. The ghost that should have been dead lived long enough to change the Pacific, to rewrite assumptions, and to leave an indelible mark on the history of World War II.